This is a cinnamon sun orchid, one of 24 species of orchids we've got in Warwick Conservation Area. And it's got some very interesting features. Because it's an orchid, there's things that it does in its flowers that are quite different from other plants. One of the main ones is there's no nectar or pollen that insects can utilize when they visit the flowers. So what happens is these are mimics. They mimic the flowers of other plants and they attract insects. And they buzz around the flowers looking for the nectar and pollen you normally would find inside an orchid. And in this case they don't find it, but by the time they worked out that it's not there, they pollinated some of the flowers. So that's how these orchids work. They're a cheating or deceiving type of pollination syndrome or pollination association with, we think, native bees, which are very active at this time of year. Other orchids we have in Warwick are pollinated different ways depending upon the time of year, but that's one example. Warwick is a special area for orchids because we have quite a large area of intact bushland, and as we observed over the years, the orchids don't necessarily stay in the same place. They tend to move around. They have very tiny wind dispersed seeds, and they can just blow around in the wind and pop up unexpectedly in another part of the bushland. So because we've got such a large area of bush here in Warwick, about 60 to 70 hectares, that's suitable habitat for orchids. That means that the orchids have a better chance of long-term survival here than they would in a smaller patch of urban bushland. Warwick Conservation Area has quite a wide diversity of orchids that flower at different times of the year, starting in autumn when we have the hair orchid, which is a fascinating little orchid that's pollinated by flying ants, through winter when we've got the bluebeard orchid and a lot of greenhood orchids, which are beautiful green or reddish brown striped orchids. And also we've got a lot of other things happening more towards spring. Spring is the peak of the orchids when we have our spider orchids, large groups of them sometimes in Warwick, and also we've got sun orchids and other groups of orchids flowering later on towards the end of spring, early summer, and it all ends now at the very end of spring, early summer, when we've got this cinnamon sun orchid, which is the last to flower, one of the last orchids in Perth, in fact, to flower each year. And it's adapted to quite dry conditions. As you can see, its leaves have already shriveled up, but that hasn't stopped it from flowering. It can use stored water to produce seeds, and it will produce, if it gets pollinated, it will produce quite a few seeds.